Hi guys, my name is Roger, and ever since I was a teenager, I've always wanted to build my own car. I started this channel to see if an average person, like me, can design and build their own mid-engine car. If you like what you see here in my videos, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. If you know someone who you think might be interested in my videos, please share the videos with them. I'll be adding a new video every week, and with that out of the way, let's get started with this week's video. want to show you guys a couple of things. I am waiting on parts from my welder. I stripped the threads out of a piece of the welder. Parts are ordered. It's going to be a couple of days, so I'm taking this time to work on some other things. Before I finish welding up the front of the car, the front frame section, I'm kind of fitting some components in here just to see how they're going to sit, interact with the frame. The steering rack, I bet it's sitting on a piece of tubing, but it will mount on a piece of tube I have ordered. That's the approximate location. It's really close. It's not perfect, but just trying to get an idea of how this steering shaft here is going to interact. I believe the steering column is going to mount about here where these vice grips are clamped to this ruler, and come down just above this tube, and then I'll have to cut and splice this shaft. It's too long. It'll need another universal joint here. So the universal joint will turn down and then continue down to this other universal and tie into the steering rack here. Just looking at angles, get a front alignment here so you can kind of see it. I believe this will work. It's going to take some manipulation, but I was aware of that. Another problem I have is the brake booster on the car, on the Corvette that it came out of, actually sits and interferes with this tube and the steering shaft. So I'm going to have to slide it over to this void area here to the left and figure out some way to connect that to the brake pedal in the car. This is the location I'm thinking about for the battery. I like this location. It fits nice and snug. The only problem might be there's 4 cooling lines coming from the rear of the car to the front. There's a supply and return to the radiators and a supply and return to the heater core. Just want to make sure there's good clearance between the battery and this tubing here for that. I think I can bend the tubes and get it to fit nicely. If not, I will move the battery up here in front of the steering rack, further forward in the car. There's plenty of room for it there also, but I've got some options. We'll see where it takes us. Also, I've been working on suspension mounting parts. I bought some pieces of this 4-inch angle. It's 5/16 thick. That's what I'm using for my suspension components. And then I'm cutting them down to smaller pieces, shaping them. There's several of these. They have to be cut down to size. I did not film making those because it's about 6 or 8 hours of mind-numbing work. And if it's mind-numbing doing it, I'm sure it's even worse to watch it on video. So I've kind of spared you guys the suffering of that. And what I'm doing is cutting these down to shape. Some of these will get a hole in them for where the suspension bolts on. Here's a suspension piece. The upper pieces have holes and are fixed, and the lower pieces will have a slot machined in it, a 1-inch slot for adjustment. Corvette and most Chevrolets use, let me find one here, use these bolts like this with eccentrics on the end. And what that does is allows you you rotate this in this channel and it slides the bolt in and out, and you can adjust the suspension for caster and camber to get the alignment just perfect on the car. You just saw me making some measurements here on this front cradle assembly for the Corvette, and what I'm doing is trying to get an exact location where the steering rack here mounts. And this is the front lower suspension and the steering rack both on this one piece, so it's easy to take some measurements and see exactly where to put the steering rack. And this is critical because if I don't get it in the right location up and down and front to rear, you can have bump steer in a car, and bump steer is exactly what it sounds like. When you hit a bump, it changes the steering of the car. So the geometry has to be precise on the location of the steering rack in alignment with the lower suspension, or all of the suspension actually, but we're taking a reference from the lower. And what I'm doing here is I need two measurements. So I can measure from a surface up to the center, the bolt center here, and same surface up to the bolt center here. I'll know the dimensional difference between these two. And here on the side, I've got the ruler here setting in the center of the slot for the suspension arm, and then this is showing the center of the steering rack. So I was able to get the two exact measurements I need, so now I know exactly where to place this steering rack on my suspension, which it'll be sitting in this general area. So I know the measurement coming off of this surface and a measurement from either the front of this tube or the back of this tube, front to rear, to position it. So now that I have the measurements I need, I'm going to fabricate two mounting brackets out of this piece of aluminum. I'll have to cut it and shape it, and they'll get welded onto this, and this will span across and be how we attach the steering rack to the front of the car. So let's get busy doing it.